Check, check, 1, 2. So I'm just waiting for players to join, or the attendees, I should say. And this is my broadcast for BrigadeCon to support Child's Play. And we will be going over the how to build a great meta campaign. So what I mean by that is, how do we build an amazing campaign that'll consist of potentially many adventures. And so I'm just waiting for other attendees to join. So if you can speak up if you're already on, that would be great. I may just, I'll just probably begin presenting then, but I'm hoping other people can join and be interactive and do all kinds of good stuff like that. So let me go ahead and start my slideshow. Okay, so building the meta campaign. What this is all about is, how do we craft a great campaign that's going to last us many adventures and make it immersive and have the characters enjoy it, or the players, I should say, and how to get them like deeply involved in understanding the story, feeling the story, enjoying the story. That's what the goal of this is. And I'd like to take this deck and then distribute it to the RPG community to update over time or enhance. But this is a goal of just having a starting point for building a great campaign, especially for people just who've got into DMing and maybe have done only one-shot modules. You may not necessarily, or feel overwhelmed. Oh man, what do I even do to begin to create a campaign, an entire campaign? And here are just some hard and fast rules around creating an amazing campaign. So let's talk about the campaign arc. What an arc is it consists of it's the scope of the entire campaign in a linear fashion, from beginning to middle to end. And a campaign should have sections. It should be broken up into multiple sections. So I'm thinking, like, I always tend to think in 3 to 5. That way, any number higher than that usually gets overwhelming and it's hard to remember all the sections or points. So I think 3 to 5 is a good number. Kind of like a television show or a movie may have 3 to 5 arcs. So the nature or the feeling of the game should change as we pass through each section. So what I mean is, you should feel a kind of ramping up, like it should get more and more intense as you're moving towards the final arc. And that would be the nature of kind of pacing. So in the pacing, in the beginning, there might be very low danger or amount of stuff going on. There's just this feeling of the campaign starting, where in the final thing, it should be the most intense and involved moment of the campaign. So that's kind of the pacing that we want to have. If you start your huge pacing too early, then the game could kind of feel slow. So again, you want to have that pacing where each section, the tension and suspense and drama get ramped up, and maybe the stakes as well get ramped up higher and higher until you lead to the final section of the campaign, which will conclude that campaign arc. You can also have the nature or the feeling of the game change as you pass through each section. And what I mean by that is kind of like the ambiance of the game. So if I were to give you an example of like maybe like a Ravenloft or an undead thing, you know, you'd start off with, you know, things wouldn't be that scary or whatever, where the last and final section should have that real ambiance of fear and sheer terror in it. It could also go for like an epic scope game. Maybe there's an invading army that's going to come and overtake your kingdom. So in the beginning, the nature of the first section might be that there's loose skirmishes and taunts, and you get that feeling, hey, the other kingdom's acting up. What's going on with this? Why are they suddenly becoming so aggressive? Where the next section, maybe there's actually real raids happening, and, you know, borderland towns are, you know, being put under the sword or burned to the ground. And then, you know, the next section might be where the army actually advances and there are pitched battles going on. You know, so again, you want to have the nature of feeling of each section change the scope. Not necessarily the scope, but you want to have that, the players feel, ooh, something big has happened. So they get that sense that we're moving through the sections of the campaign. And again, you can think in terms of story, beginning, middle, end. So in the beginning of the story, normally you're set in the character's normal world, and then they break out of their normal world. That would be the inciting incident. You want to think in the same terms of your campaign. So maybe the very beginning of your campaign, the characters are in their normal world doing their normal things, and then there's an inciting incident that breaks them into the story and sort of begins, you know, the campaign arc in their eyes. And then the midpoint, by the midpoint, they should understand who the antagonist is, whether it's a kingdom or a monster or an evil villain. You know, at that point, they kind of should know. So sections, let's say we have 5 sections. By section 2, they should be understanding that there's an antagonist. And toward the end of the middle, by section 3 for sure, they should definitely know who the big baddie is and what they're up against. And that's when they're trying to come up with a plan to complete the campaign arc, which is kind of 4 and 5. 4 might be the climax, and then 5 might be the prologue. So these sections can be, you don't want a prologue to be super long section. So the section 5 might be really short, but it just might be the wrap up, epilogue kind of thing. And section 1 could be the prologue. It might be, hey, you know, there are strange things coming on from the mountaintop, you know, that might be the prologue as to start the campaign. But again, we're talking, think in terms of an arc in sections. That pretty much covers the campaign arc and what I want to talk about it. So the next thing is, and I really love this concept, is to have a game within the game. So what I mean by that is, okay, you're playing fantasy role playing, you have your normal game mechanics, but you can add in a sub game. So this sub game, I once ran a campaign where it was a group that had a farm, and I came up with all these rules for how they could grow and monetize their farm. And I did a bunch of research. So to model the game, I read a lot of books and articles about medieval farming, and I had very simple mechanics. You don't want to make the mechanics so complicated that no one wants to do it or it's a chore, you know. And you should use spreadsheets or, you know, Google Docs, something like that, to make the mechanics just be real easy to do. Again, it doesn't want to be a chore, and you don't want to actually take away from role playing. Remember, the role playing and your campaign arc is the real important thing. But this game within a game, really, I love about it. It binds the characters to the society. It doesn't make them into, you know, what everyone calls murder hobos. You know, it really gives them something. And it could be, they could be part of an order. They could be, you know, have some valuable piece of property like a farm or a castle or an inn or a tavern that they're monetizing, you know, something like that. An earth node. I mean, you can get super creative here, but it's something that they own and they want to be around, and it binds them to society. And the whole nature of the game really changes because there's a lot more political interactions happening, because they're kind of, you know, they don't necessarily feel stuck, but they are stuck. They're bound to this area, and they love it if you do it correctly. So let's go back into the game. Do some research to model the game, and you don't have to have the game be played every single day. In fact, you want the game to take time. So you want to put the game in the seasons or years or weeks. It depends on what the nature of the game is. Maybe it's some game-to-game influence in the thieves' culture of the city that they're in. How powerful of a thieves gang or guild are they becoming? That could be the nature of the game. And so you want to come up with these terms. It'll also help. What I find in a kind of flaw in a lot of games is that people are always doing day to day, and like a character will go from first level to level X in a few weeks, you know. And if you think about it, in reality, that's so unrealistic that somebody's going to be this 10th level guy in, like, you know, 5 weeks of play, because you're playing day in and day out. You know, actually look into, and it may not be for you, but I find it really fascinating to let time fly and not have to always do the day-to-day. And this game, within a game, will kind of make the PCs willing to let time fly, because they get to do another turn on the game mechanics. And this game within a game will actually give them in-game rewards. So it might be monetary rewards. It might be political rewards. It might be all different. It depends on the nature of the game. Maybe it's a politics game, kind of like diplomacy or something, where in order for them to progress in the court hierarchy, they have to play this game effectively. I mean, you can get super creative with this, but having time fly will give your characters a sense of ownership of real life. I find it very rewarding. And I also want to show you how this can really lead into the generational game, but I'll talk about that in a subsequent slide. So again, the first time I used this mechanism and why I fell in love with it was for a medieval farm. And I had the players roll each season. I gave them bonuses when they came up with ideas for bettering their farm, like buying better farming tools, building irrigation ditches. I mean, the players were getting super creative on what they could do. And I didn't put this as a bullet point, but I also had a lot of, and you can build this within the game, like bad encounters, bad things that happen. So bandits or goblin horde attacks or droughts, you know, other things that negatively affect their farm or whatever it is, whatever type of game you're running, their property, or even if it's in diplomatic terms, it might be like a major victory diplomatically by one of their rivals. But man, it's so cool. It just really enhances the storytelling. And, you know, these characters love their farm, man. They had really earned an income from it and defended it against, you know, many different attacks on the farm from, again, bandits and goblins and what have you. They loved their farm. They were building walls around it, and it was amazing. It was just so rewarding for them and for me to actually watch them become so into not only their characters, but their whole village, and how they dealt with laws in the village since they were kind of the village leaders. Oh man, it was just amazing. But you should also be careful with the bonuses that you hand out for these ideas that they come up with. Make them small incremental changes, so that way they don't get excessive and the farm just doesn't become this amazing like fortune generating thing because the bonuses have got out of hand. In fact, you might want to break it into levels. Like maybe they're on the tier 1 farm and the tier 1 farm really sucks, you know, and it hardly gives out anything. And no matter how many bonuses they get on the tier 1 farm, it's not going to be that good. And they got to work up the farm. Maybe it'll take them X number of years to get the farm to the tier 2 farm where they then get a little bit more bonuses. So then the ideas that they need, maybe they don't get to a tier 2 farm until it's irrigated and they're using the proper plowing techniques. You know, you get the idea. You can break it up into multiple tiers. So that's my concept of the game within a game. And again, I found this so rewarding. I love this whole concept, which is why I always tend to use it. I don't feel that it becomes trite or overused. My players now expect it and they look forward to it. And you just need to get creative with it. That's it. It can be any type of game. You can even kind of leverage some of the other board or card games. I mean, you can get so creative with this. And I'm sure you guys will go way beyond my simple example. So let me go to the next slide. So running PCs in an order. I love this as well. And again, you can do the game within a game in this. But what are the concepts? What are the important parts for running PCs in an order? Number one, have rivals. So it could be members of the same order, your allies, but these guys are rivals to the party. And they always tend to outperform the party or outshine the party, and they look down on the party. So it's a great chance for having that rivalry. And whenever you give the PCs a chance to beat the rivals, especially if the rivals are tending to win all the time, it's a very rewarding feeling for those PCs to beat the rivals. You also want to have tiers in gaining status. So you want to make sure that you don't start the PCs hanging out with the head of the order. You know, you want to have them work up to that. So they might start out as really low snuffies in the order, and the guy that they report to is a really low-level guy, and you might have to make them work to get to the next tier. And you might want to have, again, 3 to 5 tiers and make each tier successively harder to get to. And, create ranks for the PCs. Make them go on missions to earn rank status, and make them have a certain number of accomplishments before they can even move to the next rank. That's such a great way of giving your PCs goals and motivation to adventure and work together and to further the goals or the goals of the order. So the next thing is you should have factions within the order. So even though it's the same order, there might be factional rivalry in it. Like Monk Dan doesn't really care for Monk Ted. They operate really differently. Maybe one is chaotic good and the other is lawful good, and they really think differently and they don't like each other. So it's a great way to, again, have, conflict and tension are the essence of storytelling. And so you want to have lots of chances for conflict and tension even within the own order. And then, of course, you can add on that by having external orders as antagonists, and then you have ready-made foes for the PCs. So now they're competing with their rivals, they're competing with the factions in the order, plus they have the other opposite orders to deal with who are antagonists. There's so much juicy stuff for role-playing here, for drama, tension, and complex political machinations. I love it. It's kind of like a Game of Thrones thing where there are all these different competing objectives, and an order is such a good way to have that and to give the PCs reasons for adventures, and it's just binding them together because they're members of the order. I just love it. Okay, so next slide, the generational game. Now, I love this concept. The concept of the generational game is where your characters will have children, and those children will become adventurers, and you're going to play this game, this campaign arc, over, if it's a human, maybe 50, 60 years. If it's an elf, of course, who knows, depending upon which world you're playing in. It could be hundreds of years, thousands of years. And that may seem like counterintuitive, like how do you even do that? It's impossible, but it actually is possible. And I'm going to go back to my thing of game within a game, and that is give them some important domain to own or run, and then have the turns of that be in the time periods that you need to make this a generational game. So it might be every 5 years that you have a role. And so you make these timelines lengthy, and you can still have amazing plots. So one campaign, maybe you have 10 different roles on this that you're going to have throughout the entire campaign, and the campaign's going to last 50 years. So you're going to have 5-year increments in your roles, and you're going to space out your adventures, maybe 2 adventures per 5 years. You can still have amazing stuff happen. And the beauty of this is just watching your characters get old and have all these achievements and have children, and the children can be amazing role-playing tools. So they can have lots of issues. You got all these problem children, the black sheep, who are doing all these things, and they're so hard to control, and it's like, oh my God, he did what? I got to do what as an adventurer to get him out of whatever he did? He pissed off this neighboring kingdom. Oh my God, You can also have the PCs or the players actually run the children in side adventures. There's just so much rich opportunity for storytelling. And when you have a character that has gotten old, when you've actually seen them progress through age and life, I feel that you really become endeared to the character. I can't explain it, but I think you should try it at least once and see if the generational game is one for you or one that you want to try occasionally. I just find it very rewarding and very interesting. So that's my thoughts on the generational game. And let me go to the next slide. So crafting great villains. Good villains need good motivations. You've got to create a great backstory for your villain. What a good motivation will do is have your villain their actions will always make sense because you will understand deeply, hopefully, the motivations of your villain. And when you deeply understand their motivations, it's very easy to run the villain because you know where they're coming from, you know what their goals are, you know why they have their goals, and even if their goals need to alter, you understand the underpinnings of how they came up with their goals. And it's awesome. Having a great backstory really makes it not just a number crunch. I'm not just going up. This goes for your monsters as well. Having a monster with a great backstory could mean that maybe it takes several adventures to actually kill the monster, and the monster is just so interesting then if you come up with a great, interesting backstory. A lot of people take the tact where they're going to turn their monster in an ice-wielding, undead, elf, dragon, whatever. They have all these adjectives tied onto the monster. And to me, at some point it becomes so ridiculous, like it's not interesting anymore. It actually becomes, the undead necrotic poodle. It becomes like ridiculous. It's okay to use those tools sometimes, but when that's the only tool that you're using to create a monster, I feel that it becomes trite. So I think having a great backstory can be used together with that or separate, but having a great backstory, I think, is the key. I think if you have a great backstory, you can't go wrong. And then from there, you can get super creative with the monster's abilities or whatever. So going back to great villains, let them have lots of henchmen and lieutenants. And the reason I say that is if you want your villain, if you don't want to use your villain up too quickly, they need these henchmen and lieutenants to protect them from the PCs. So if you put your villain head-to-head with the PC and you constantly let him escape, that is going to rub your players wrong. So you can do that once in a while, but if constantly the guy is getting away, that's going to be very unmotivating for your PCs. So that's why having a lot of good henchmen and lieutenants for the PCs to beat up on and defeat is a really good thing. And you want to give your PCs lots of little victories. So another way of giving your PCs victories is let them destroy things that are important to the villain. It doesn't have to be that they're always killing his henchmen and lieutenants. Sometimes they might get a tip, maybe from a friend or from the use of Streetwise or at a tavern or whatever through their underground connections. They might learn of a tip and a way of dealing a blow or setback to the villain. And I find that the PCs love that, especially if the villain has been really giving them a lot of heartache and really interfering with them. causing the villain a setback is like, you know, they just love it. They eat it up. And it's a great way to introduce more obstacles and give the characters, you know, things to do within the campaign arc. Okay, so my next slide is generating good plots. There's this book. It's such an awesome book. It's based on writing, and it's called 20 Master Plots. And I highly, highly, highly recommend this for DMs. It is such a great way to be able to understand the different plots available to you to come up with great campaigns or great stories. So I'm just gonna kind of briefly go through them here. The first one we're all kind of already familiar with, being DMs. The quest. So a quest is a mission, some important life-altering mission. The important thing about a quest is the characters should feel compelled to do it. Like the reason should be overwhelmingly necessary. So that's the danger. If you design a quest that isn't overwhelmingly necessary for the characters to complete, they just may never go on it or put it off or whatever. You want to make this quest absolutely important to the characters. And it should tie in on an emotional level. Like maybe their mom is a crippling disease and the only way they can cure it is to go on this quest. And they love their mom. I mean, that is super good motivation. But if the quest is, oh, you know, this old guy told me about a quest, like, and I have no real emotional attachment to the quest, well, you know, they may not go on it. So adventure is just more like leaving the nest kind of thing. I'm sure you guys kind of understand the underpinnings, since you're DMs, of how to run an adventure. It doesn't have to have the incredible purpose that a quest will have. And it's different. It's not life-altering. It's just, hey, some guy that I'm friends with asked me for a favor or something like that. That's kind of the nature of an adventure. Pursuit. Pursuit is an awesome one. You are chasing someone for whatever reason. As long as the reason's well done, obviously, I shouldn't say for whatever reason, but coming up with a good reason is imperative. But chasing someone is a great story arc. It makes for a great campaign arc, especially if the guy or thing or group of people are seriously hard to catch. And, you know, maybe they have aides or comrades, maybe they have this underground network protecting them, and anytime you get close to them as they're running away, their underground network will try to intervene and stop you. That can be an awesome one. Rescue, pretty obvious. You know, something important needs to be rescued. Not much to say about that. I think you all guys get it. Escape is a good plot, but one you have to be careful with, because putting the characters into a place that's super limiting, like a jail cell, and they don't escape immediately, you know, let me tell you, man, they are going to be super bored and not enjoy your campaign. So you have to get very, very, very creative with this escape thing. It might be escape from the kingdom. So maybe there's a lot of escaping to be done, but it's not them just, maybe they start in a jail cell, escape from that, but now they have to get out of the kingdom. And that's still part of the escape. I once had a party start in a dungeon, and they had to escape from the dungeon. And that was awesome. They really loved it. It was challenging, and they didn't even know where they were in the dungeon, whether they should go up or down, you know, because the dungeon was not like, it was like in this cavern complex. So it wasn't immediately obvious that they should go up, because up could be maybe more into the mountain. Who knew? You know, they didn't know. So that's kind of a cool thing. An escape can be well done, but it can also fail seriously, again, if you're not careful about how you think about the escape and don't limit the characters too much. That can be a real problem. Revenge, classic tale. Count of Monte Cristo, you know, one of my favorite books. Revenge is such an amazing motivator. I can't even begin to explain how focused your PCs will be on adventure when it is a revenge one, or on a campaign when it's a campaign about revenge. It's the ultimate motivator. It really is. The riddle. The riddle is, actually, I struggle with the riddle. Coming up with a great riddle is not easy. I would say the riddle maybe could be one of the most challenging plots, for me anyway. You know, maybe for you guys, I would love to hear after this some tips that you guys have on the riddle, because I need help with it. I can tell you that I love coming up with these complex riddles, but then sometimes they're too complicated. I once had this world where I generated a bunch of different riddles, and one of them I actually used ink and quill, and I created this code, and I actually put it in coffee, soaked the paper in coffee, baked it in the oven. I mean, this thing was awesome. It actually looked like an old parchment document, but it took the characters in real world times 4 years to crack this riddle. It was a little too complicated. And actually, the original party never cracked it. We had one guy who came over, and he was this amazing chess player buddy of mine. And he was smart, man. He got hooked on this riddle, and he took pictures of the document, and he went back, and he spent the entire weekend working on the riddle, and he figured it out. It was so impressive. I gave him so much experience for it. Just incredible. But the riddle, man, I struggle with the riddle. When is the riddle going to be too easy? When is it going to be too hard? I don't know. And I don't even know of a good avenue for finding good riddles. I mean, there are riddles out there like the, you know, what walks on 3 legs, and, you know, but those aren't really, you don't want to use a riddle like that. You want to come up with your own riddle, and whether it's mathematical or algebraic or, you know, I don't know, you know, some sort of code. But man, again, I struggle with it. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the riddle. Rivalry. Again, I've already mentioned rivalry, like rival factions. Rivalry is it's a great campaign arc, especially if you mix it. And you can mix some of these plots. Mix rivalry with the quest. Maybe you've got rivals, maybe you've got an order, and there's this huge important quest that the order needs to fulfill, and it's going to take, you know, a long time to do. And you've got rivals who are also sent out along with you on the quest. And man, that just when you're competing, when the PCs are competing with a bunch of NPCs that they can't maim or kill because they're part of the same order, It's awesome. A lot of role playing available with that happening. I used that once where the PCs were pretty high level and they had to go into hell on this mission. They had rivals in there, and it was really funny, and just all the things that happened, all the conflict that happened because of the rivalry. Okay, so the underdog. The underdog from a story point would be like the Rocky. So the movie Rocky was all about the underdog. I don't necessarily know how I would use the underdog in role playing unless your PCs are considered the underdog for some reason. But I think this type of plot, I don't know. I don't have good answers to this one. Again, I would love to hear the group input on how you would run an underdog campaign. Temptation. So temptation's pretty good one. It could be that the PCs are tempted by greed or lust or, you know, the other things that tempt them into this campaign. And this is a potential, the temptation one is a good thing where you can kind of, you know, maybe make them come out not so good at the end for doing the temptation. Now, of course, you don't always want to do this, or the people are going to hate DMing with you or gaming with you. But sometimes they shouldn't always win in a campaign. And temptation is a good one where you can have them actually, you know, lose something because they yielded to their temptation. So that might be a good way to use that one. Okay, so we have 20 master plots. Let me go through the next 10. Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis represents a change. You know, in metamorphosis, you know, the caterpillar will turn into the butterfly, and it's sort of, the characters may change. Maybe they're clerics in an order and they finally take on their divine aspect when they at the end of this plot, or maybe the characters metamorphose into some more powerful magic, or in some cases they're going on this to make a fundamental change. Maybe to get past level 10, they have to go on to this campaign, and maybe it's just training. And I love to do training in my campaigns where I say, hey, if you want to progress at certain levels, you have to get trained to become a master. Maybe to move from beginner to journeyman, you have to get trained. You have to find a trainer who's already a journeyman to train you. Or to become a master at something, you have to find a master to train you. And so this could be part of the metamorphosis campaign arc, where they need to go and find this trainer on the mountain, you know, the Buddha, to train them in this mystical arts so they can gain the next level, or their martial arts, or their swordsmanship art, whatever it may be. But I'm sure you can get even more creative with that, but there are a lot of interesting ways to create a campaign arc around that. Now, transformation kind of sounds like metamorphosis, but I think it's different in the fact that, you know, and I'm not even sure, I have to look this one up. It is one of the plots I know, and I'm not sure exactly how it's different from metamorphosis. Because it's not a change of their personality, because that's what will fall into ascension and descension, which I'll talk about that in 19 and 20. So, you know, I'm going to have to look up transformation. I apologize about that. Or in notes after, I would love to hear what people's thoughts are. Maturation. that's the kind of coming of age story. And that's great for low-level PCs to have that mature theme. Hey, we're not going to be, and it's sort of a metamorphosis, I would say, but it's the common theme of what do I need to do to become a man, you know, and maybe the PCs need to bring themselves into adulthood to get to second level, whatever. They need to complete this campaign arc. And maybe it's built into their society or their tribe, or, you know, it's something so important to their culture that they have to complete. And maybe they'll be judged at the end of it. Maybe they don't get their traditional sword or of the order or something like that until they've actually completed this campaign arc. So give them a lot of motivation and do it well. You know, maybe their reward will be tempered by how well they do in this maturation type campaign arc. Love is a great story arc. And you know what? It's not, I don't believe, at least in the campaigns that I played in over the many years, used enough. Having love with NPCs, or with, and I'm not talking about, oh, we're going to the neighborhood brothel. I mean like a true, deep, like emotional attachment with an NPC. So male, female, it doesn't matter. Like it could be a familial relation, it could be a person of love interest, but there are a lot of ways to build that into your campaign arc. And I find it super rewarding, because when you do have this love interest and they get in jeopardy, like, oh my God, like the party, and especially the player who has the love interest, is deeply, deeply motivated on this campaign arc. So I would say try and introduce, if you're not using that, try it. I think it's really a powerful, it's, you know, obviously one of the most powerful human emotions, and it's really a powerful tool for getting your characters into a campaign. So forbidden love. The way this can be used is, hey, your low-level peasant guy falls for an important noble's daughter, you know. That's like the classic kind of forbidden love. And it can be an interesting tool in a campaign, especially if the character's never able to achieve it. I mean, you want to be careful with that one too, because you don't want your characters to get frustrated either. But it's sort of an interesting thing to play on. Not as powerful as love, but can make for an occasional interesting campaign arc. Sacrifice is a powerful one, but especially, obviously, you don't want your PCs running around sacrificing themselves all the time. Otherwise, you'll have no PCs left. I've heard of great campaigns where at the end, the paladin sacrifices himself for the party or whatever, and you know, that can be really awesome when that happens, but it's clearly only should happen at the end of a huge campaign or multiple campaigns happening, and it's sort of the end of the character's life, no pun intended, but it's the whole end of everything. That can be good, but it can also be used when NPCs sacrifice themselves for the party, especially if there was love or forbidden love, or the NPCs have really bonded themselves with the party and time again have helped the party. So when the NPC sacrifices himself for the party, that is powerful, man. And that can then lead into revenge, where the next campaign is about getting revenge on the evil villain who made the NPC sacrifice himself for the party. So definitely a powerful one. Discovery. Discovery is more like, I use this with either, and you want to be careful, you don't want to give away too many powerful things in your world, but powerful points. Like, I use this lines in my world where I'll have ley lines, and that actually, they affect magic. So I'll actually know where in my world these ley lines meet and how they meet, and they might have interesting effects at their junctures, and that magic might actually change when you're on a ley line, and it may actually get extremely powerful where ley lines cross, or extremely weak where ley lines cross, or extremely unpredictable. So discovery can be used where the characters, the campaign is all about them, you know, going out to do research and to find things, or find out this earth node and discover all about it. Maybe an order sends them out to do it. So, but I think that's a well-used one. I think discovery is pretty popular and people have used it a lot, but it's still a cool tool to have a campaign about, and it shouldn't be ignored. I think if you're really changing the plots that you use from campaign to campaign, I don't think your campaigns will ever get predictable. No one will know, like, what the campaign's going to be about. They won't say, oh, if every time you're doing a discovery plot, because that's all you haven't thought a lot about campaign arcs. Oh, now they'll go out and discover this, and then they'll discover that. I think after a while, the campaigns will start to become predictable and not as fun to play. Predictability is not usually good. Sometimes it's good, but not always. So predictability in campaigns, one after another, is not a good thing. So using these different plots and really changing it up, I think makes it awesome. Your PCs are thrown for a loop, your players are thrown for a loop, they never know what's going to happen next. It's awesome. So wretched excess. Wretched excess is sort of the character who goes overboard on something. The Jekyll and Hyde sort of, you know, I don't know how well this can be used for the players, but for the NPCs or the villains, it's definitely a great tool. So they could be, you know, wretched in excess of their brutality or greed or one of the many other vices that's causing problems to an area or a region. It could be a dragon, wretched excess in their destruction. You know, that's the classic tale, the Smog, we've got to take this guy out. But you can get really creative with the different vices and figure out a way. Maybe this monster isn't really destroying anything, but they're eating things. Like they're eating all the crops. They like can't satisfy their appetite, and that's bringing starvation and famine, because this monster is just not killing anybody, just eating everything, you know? So that would be a kind of a form of wretched excess. So ascension and descension. Ascension is we're going from bad to good, and descension is we're going from good to bad. And the classic descension tale that everybody I'm sure is familiar with is Breaking Bad. Walter White is this screwed over chemist he's a brilliant chemist, and he's forced to, I hope I'm not spoiling. Spoiler alert. Stop listening to this if you haven't watched Breaking Bad yet. But anyway, Breaking Bad is the classic dissension tale. And it's a character going from, if you've already seen Breaking Bad, I think you get it now. Walter White descends into evil. Slowly, over time, he becomes more and more evil and throwing away his moral boundaries. And it's obviously such an awesome show. I love it. Loved it. So Ascension is just the opposite. And this could be an interesting tale in a plot. And I must admit, I've never used it on a villain. Can you imagine the possibilities of starting out with this super evil villain who becomes good over time? I can't even wrap my brain around it yet, but I now know I want to try it just thinking about it. What if a villain is going through the process of ascension? How would that play out in the campaign arc? Man, I don't know. I really want to sit down and brainstorm just that because it's so interesting. Also, I think using the dissension plot on a NPC that has been loyal to the party would be a trip, would be just incredible. So we've got this PC who, over the course of many campaign arcs, have always been a good guy, always helped, like the PCs trust this guy. But now coming up with the proper backstory as to why this guy went into dissension is going to be critical to this. But watching the guy descend and then over a campaign arc and then feeding bits and pieces to the PCs of why he's descending might also be a super interesting campaign arc. Maybe one of the party's rivals is causing him to descend. Maybe it's a powerful thieves guild who's finally come on to the fact that this guy's always helping the party. Or it's a rival kingdom, like in spycraft. Normally you go through, when you go to work for the DOD or whatever, you have to get a security clearance. When they do that, they look at your financials and your friends and your history and all these things. And really what they want to find out is about your character, but they also want to make sure that the tools aren't in place for the enemy to cause you to descend. And, you know, whether it's financial trouble, so they really look at your financials, but these are the tools that an enemy spy will use to leverage a person into spying for them. And you can use these same tools. So your thieves guild or whatever, or the rival kingdom can start to use these tools, you know, the capturing of the daughter to the putting pressure on the daughter. I'm going to make the daughter fail in her studies, and I'm also going to, you know, kill your business. I'm going to start a competing business against you if you don't do what I need you to do. It's a classic. If you watch a lot of those spy thrillers, you'll see these kinds of elements happen. But man, that could be, especially if the NPC starts descending at first and the PCs don't realize it. They just, holy cow, like who's screwing us over? Maybe they don't know in the beginning. And then they learn, wow, like Ted is screwing us over? No way, like that's impossible. Someone is posing as Ted, and it's not really Ted, but, you know, and then finding out that it actually is Ted is like another stunning blow to them. These kind of things, surprises and adventures, are awesome. It's such a cool way to make the campaign just interesting and unique and mixing it up. So it's a great twist. So I think Ascension and Descension can be an awesome twist to a campaign that the characters will find mind-blowing if you do it right. Okay, so hey, I've been doing good. I've been talking to myself for an hour now, so hopefully I've been being entertaining. I was hoping to make it interactive, but I don't know this YouTube streaming thing enough, so I wasn't able to do that, but hopefully I'm being entertaining. But I would love to hear from you guys in the comments about what I'm talking about. So I want to hear back from you. I wish it could have been interactive, and maybe we can do a follow-on interactive thing in Google Hangouts for those interested or something at a different time and date, because I love thinking about DMing. And I always want to say, how can I be a bit better DM? I want to be a better DM. I want to constantly improve. Even though I've been doing it for a long time, there are a lot of flaws in my DMing. But anyway, going back to running a city campaign. So one of the things about a city campaign that I think is critical, especially if the characters are going to be thieves. You don't want what the characters are going to do is they're going to try to rob the richest homes and get the best loot right from the beginning. That's a problem, obviously. So they're either going to get blown up by the wards because they're too low level to rob this wealthy estate, or by the other protections. So they're going to be a TPK on themselves, or they're just going to fail and fail and fail. But you know, characters tend to be greedy like that. They want to do everything all in one shot. Well, how do you stop that? So I thought about, and how I run city campaigns, especially, I love running thief campaigns. I love it. It's so interesting. Low magic thief campaigns, I find super entertaining. I don't know. The whole Lankmar, I'm like super into Lankmar. And I played in multiple Lankmar campaigns, and I love it. It's so many interesting adventures. But how do we limit the characters from going over to the wealthy quarter? Well, we can limit the characters' movement within the city. And we can do that if you think about LA or Chicago or all these rival gangs. Well, hey, if you're in another gang and you're going into a territory, even if you're not in a gang and they don't recognize you and you're in their territory, you could be in trouble. You could get beat up. So this could be the way of limiting character movement. So the only places that they can rob or steal from when they're starting out at first level is Shantytown. So in Shantytown, when you rob a person, they're not going to have a lot of effects because they live in Shantytown. And the guards, you know, the guards can be, yes, guards in a corrupt city can be bribed, but you have to remember that, like, even though a guard can be bribed, doesn't mean he'll accept a bribe from you. So, like, you're this first level poor thief, and this guard's getting paid off by a higher level mafia. So, yes, he's eminently bribable, but not by you, because you are a peon, and you are a member of some low-level gang. He doesn't care about you, and he knows that if he took your money, he would get in more trouble. So he's going to be unbribable, not because he has high moral standards, but because he knows it's a bad idea to take a bribe from you, because he was told to keep your ilk out of this section. And maybe that section is a tougher gang that controls the next section, and this tougher gang has paid him off to do that. So he is not going to be easy to bribe. And even if you had the money to bribe him, he might be so afraid of this other gang, he might not be willing to take a higher bribe. So it's not always about the money. So zones. Make a gang map of your city. First off, have lots of gangs. Have gangs with cool names. You know, the Dragon's Corner gang, because they hang out by the Bar of Dragons. The, you know, the Leaning Shanty gang. You know, oh man, that adds such flavor to your city. So lay out a gang map. And you could even have overlapping areas where there are lots of fights and disputes between one or more gangs. Have this whole gang map, and that's how characters' movement is limited in the city. So the section or the second they step into another gang's territory, they're going to get challenged. Maybe in the beginning when they're low level, the other gang just says, get out of here. And maybe they don't listen. Maybe they get beat up. And that's another good idea too for a city game. Not every combat has to be deadly, nor should it be deadly. It can bring a rich role-playing experience when the game isn't deadly. I once had, well, I still have it. In my homebrew world, no one can kill in the kingdom of the elves, so you cannot kill an elf. Even in self-defense, even if the elf is attacking you to try and kill you, you cannot kill the elf. So elves cannot kill elves, outsiders cannot kill elves, but there is no real rule in the elf world that the elf cannot kill an outsider. They can, as long as it's justified. I know, it's awesome. But it's a great way of making everybody not be murder hobos. So like if they know they're going to get hung by the yardarm for killing, it really makes the interesting ways, man. They have to use their fists. They have to use non-lethal weapons. And a party becomes more willing to negotiate and banter, and sometimes more willing, in some cases, to fight as well, because they know they're not going to get killed. They'll get beat up, they'll get their possessions stolen, but they won't get killed. It's fascinating, and I think it's something you should think about. Putting the PCs in a section or in a town or whatever where they cannot kill. Really interesting. What else? Create tiers of gangs. So, you know, the lowest level might be your thugs, which are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 at most. Gang of low-level thieves. And then the level 2s might be a bit tougher. The level 3s might be like really, really tough. And then, of course, the top tier gangs. And you can have each of the gangs grow in size as you move up the tiers. So the top tier gang, there might be like 3 or 4 top tier gangs in a city, and they're all competing against each other. And maybe each one of them has like 100 members, depending upon how big your city is, obviously. But it's just a way of the party working itself up. Maybe they can't even get into a tier or a level. I shouldn't say level, because then you'll get confused with level, but I mean tiers. So they might not be able to get into a tier 2 gang until they're 5th level. And maybe when they become 5th level, a bunch of gangs are trying to get them into their gang, and that might be, there's lots of cool role playing there. Again, for tier 3, maybe they have to be 10th level, you know, all kinds of interesting ideas depending upon what systems you're running. Make sure there's upward mobility within a gang. So if they're part of a gang, they should also be trying to increase their status. And you can go back to my lecture on order and, you know, use those kinds of same techniques that you would within a gang. And again, I already talked about moving onwards and upwards to a greater gang. Maybe there are initiation rites that you have to perform, special missions. You probably have to tithe the gang monies, etc. But man, it just makes for a really rich city campaign if you use some or more of these tools. Running a wilderness campaign. So I love to use the survival angle. I had a bunch of orcs that were living in the desert, and the PCs were orcs. And it was so tough for them to move around. They always had to think of water and where the water holes were. And they would, you know, they were building carts, and it was tough actually they had to have specialized carts that they could carry over rocks and stuff just to haul their water, because they needed so much water. You actually need a ton of water if you're moving through the desert. So putting those kinds of shackles on them, actually, I think makes for deeper role play. I love a gritty style, though. So if you don't like a gritty style, this may be too much for you. But for me, I love a gritty style. So I love to force the players to think about survival and shelter and food and fire starting and all those things when they're playing outside of a city. But give them a base of operations. I've just found, like, if they're just wandering around the wilderness without a purpose, I think it's hard to run a good campaign like that. They need either a base of operations or some place that they're going to. And it could be something really interesting, like a forest city of wood elves, where every once in a while, maybe it's like a week's journey away or 3 days away, but every once in a while they need to return to the city to resupply, refit, stock up, get healed, you know. And you could make it so clever and so interesting. There are so many different woodland races that you could build a city or a community around, even weird ones like a brownies, or, you know, and the PCs probably hate going back to the brownie city because the brownies are just so annoying, but they need to go there because it's like, it's the place where they can get all their supplies from, and it can make for comical or interesting adventures as well. But even if you have a wilderness campaign, you still need an overarching story. Just throwing people into the woods, I don't think it could be interesting in the beginning, but it's going to die out. You really do need an overarching story that makes this wilderness campaign interesting. So I think that's an important asset or aspect of it. Okay, character introductions. One of my pet peeves. Tie the characters together before the campaign starts. I've played so many new campaigns where, you know, the characters have no reason to be together, and they have to try within that half hour to an hour to come up on their own why they should be together. And it's so artificial, or it doesn't happen. You know, motivations, you have to give your players great motivations to work together. And you do that, the best way is in the backstory. You can make one or two of your party members blood relations, married. You know, they could be part of the same order or faction. They need to have something tying them together, and the whole party needs to be tied together in a good way so that it's obvious why they should work together. If it's not obvious why they should all be working together, then I think that you haven't done a good enough job in your backstory. And it's good to think about these character motivations too, in further on when you're designing your adventures. I have this really fun anecdote that one of my buddies who was running a campaign many years ago bought a module, and we were all getting together that day to run this module, to play in this module with them. And the intro to the module was that a dwarf came up to us and needed help. So that was the intro to the module. But one of the characters of the game, of the party, had Bane against dwarves. He hated dwarves. So he said, there is no way on earth I am helping this dwarf. And we're like, you know, we were in a dilemma because it was like that was the only way to lead into the module. And I remember Gary rolling up the module and smacking the player on the head with the rolled up module because he couldn't use it. But it was really his fault because he should have came up with a different thing. Character motivations are so important. You have to consider them. That's what drives adventures. That's what drives campaigns. And it was a funny anecdotal moment. But again, please don't do the traditionals characters meet the first time in a tavern. I beg of you, don't do that. Have a great hook to start the campaign, especially if it's the characters meeting for the first time. Please have a good hook. It's imperative. Otherwise, I mean, you know, it's all about like first perceptions, especially if it's a new group. If the new group just immediately understands the goal and why they need to work together, the campaign, the adventure just flows and they have a good time. They think you're a great DM. They want to keep playing. They're immersed in the story. That's the goal. I believe that is all I have to talk about. I really hope some of these points were rewarding. If I've missed anything, if I didn't talk about important points, please leave it in the comments. Again, I want to grow as a DM. I want everybody to grow as a DM. If you really have some critical comments, man, I have super thick skin. Go ahead and post them right in the comments. I want to hear it. Hey, if you want to compliment me, if you really dug some of this material, say that as well. I just really want to interact with other DMs. I want to learn and grow and get better as a DM and watch other DMs get better. I just love this hobby of ours. And yeah, that's it. So I hope it was rewarding. And I'm going to go ahead and end this broadcast. It's been about an hour and 15 minutes. And I hope you all had a good time. And please, whether or not you enjoyed this, I really do hope that you donate to Child's Play. They're an amazing charity. It's such a good cause. And that's what this BrigadeCon event is all about. It's all about that charity. I also want to thank Andre and everyone else at BrigadeCon and all the members of RPG Brigade. And I also want to thank Nate. He doesn't really know me. I'm just like a subscriber on his YouTube channel. But Nate of WAS D20 was the guy who led me into this whole RPG Brigade and BrigadeCon thing. That's how I found out about him. The guy just seems super cool. I wish he could have joined in on this panel, actually, but maybe next year. But anyway, again, thank you all so much, and I hope you had a great time. Bye-bye.